Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story. Thunder crashed overhead as rain lashed against the bulletproof windows of Ethan Marshall's Maybach. The drops hit like tiny bullets against the impenetrable fortress he surrounded himself with, both in metal and spirit. The luxury vehicle's headlights sliced through the gloom of the city's most notorious neighborhood, illuminating crumbling buildings, spray-painted with territorial gang symbols. "Mr. Marshall, this isn't the route I programmed." Carter, his driver of 7 years, said nervously, knuckles white against the steering wheel. "The GPS rerouted us through here because of the multi-car pileup on the expressway." Ethan's jaw tightened as he glanced up from his tablet, displaying the final projections for the Japanese merger, the deal that would cement his legacy as the most formidable CEO under 40'd. At 36, he'd built Marshall Tech Empire from the smoking ruins of his father's bankrupted company into a technological behemoth valued at $16 billion. His ruthlessness in business had earned him the moniker, the Titan of Tech, a title he wore like armor, along with his hand-tailored Tom Ford suits. "Just get us through quickly," he ordered, his deep voice resonating with authority that brooked no argument. "I need to be downtown in 30 minutes." Lightning split the sky in a violent flash, followed almost instantly by a deafening crack of thunder. The Maybach shuddered, sputtered, and then died completely, coasting to a stop beneath a broken streetlight. "What the hell?" Ethan demanded, emerald green eyes narrowing dangerously. "I don't understand." "Sire, the car was just serviced yesterday." Carter frantically tried the ignition, but the engine remained silent. Ethan's hand tightened around his phone, ready to unleash his frustration when movement outside caught his eye. Through the rain-streaked window, he spotted 3 men surrounding a solitary figure at a bus stop across the street. Even through the downpour, he could make out their aggressive postures and the glint of something metallic, a knife or gun in one man's hand. The figure they encircled wasn't cowering as expected. Instead, despite being outnumbered and at least a head shorter than her harassers, a young woman stood fierce and unmoving. Behind her, partially protected by her slim body, an elderly homeless man clutched his meager possessions, while a small girl clung to the woman's rain-soaked jacket. "Give us the old man's bag, pretty thing, and maybe we'll let you ride with us somewhere dry," the tallest assailant taunted, reaching toward her face. What happened next stunned Ethan. The woman slapped the man's hand away with lightning speed. "Touch me again, and you'll pull back a stump," she said, her voice carrying through the storm with a clarity that suggested she meant every word. "He's just a veteran trying to stay dry. Leave him alone." The man's face contorted with rage. "You don't talk to me like that, bitch." He lunged forward, grabbing her arm. Without conscious decision, Ethan found himself shoving open the car door. "Sir," Carter protested, but Ethan was already striding through the downpour. "Is there a problem here?" he asked coldly, rain instantly plastering his $1,000 suit to his athletic frame. Up close, he towered over the would-be attackers, his presence commanding, despite being outnumbered. The shortest thug assessed Ethan's expensive watch and confident stance. "This isn't your business. Richman, keep walking if you want to stay pretty." Ethan's laugh held no humor. "I haven't been worried about staying pretty since I left the foster system at 18. The lie came easily. His childhood had been privileged, but these men didn't need to know that. "Now back off." Something in his dead-eyed stare made them reconsider. With muttered curses, they retreated down the street, occasionally glancing back with promises of retribution in their eyes. "I had it handled," the woman said, her voice both musical and defiant as she turned toward him. Ethan's caustic response died on his lips as he found himself staring into the most remarkable eyes he'd ever encountered. Deep hazel with flecks of gold that seemed to catch what little light existed in the storm. Rain streamed down her face, highlighting cheekbones that could cut glass and full lips pressed into a determined line. Her clothes were worn but immaculately clean. Jeans with carefully mended knees and a rain jacket that had seen better days, pulled protectively around her slim figure. "I'm sure you did," he finally managed, unable to look away from those extraordinary eyes. "But I have a policy against watching 3-against-1 fights, especially when they're armed." The elderly man behind her coughed violently, the sound wet and concerning. "Mr. Watts needs to get somewhere dry," she said, genuine worry, replacing defiance in her expression. "This weather is dangerous for his lungs." She turned to the child clinging to her side. "Lila, baby, are you okay?" The little girl nodded bravely, though her lips trembled with cold. "I'm fine, Auntie Nora." Ethan became acutely aware of the rain still hammering down on them all. Water dripped from his once perfect hair into his eyes as he glanced back at his disabled luxury car. Carter was frantically speaking into his phone, likely calling for assistance. "Your driver won't get help for at least an hour in this weather," the woman said, following his gaze. "The towing companies avoid this neighborhood after dark, even without a storm." "How did you?" "I've lived here my whole life." She cut him off. "You're not from around here. Obviously. In that suit. You're a target. My place is just down the block. You can wait there until your rescue arrives." The offer seemed to pain her slightly, as though inviting him into her space went against her better judgment. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Trust didn't come naturally to him, especially not from beautiful strangers in dangerous neighborhoods, but something in her directness intrigued him. She wasn't fawning or flirtatious, like the women who usually circled him, drawn by his power and wealth. If anything, she seemed annoyed by his very existence. A violent gust of wind drove the rain sideways, making the little girl gasp. "Please, mister," the child said, her large eyes, so similar to her aunt's, peering up at him. "Mister, Watts is shaking real bad." The homeless man was indeed trembling, his weathered face pale beneath his soaked beard. Carter approached cautiously. "Sir, roadside assistance can't reach us for at least 90 minutes due to the flooding." Ethan made his decision. "Fine. Lead the way." "Miss Vale." "Nora Valley," she replied, to no trace of fear in her voice. Despite inviting a stranger into her, "And you are?" "Ethan Marshall." If she recognized his name, impossible not to. In business circles, she showed no reaction. "Well, Mr. Marshall, follow me and stay close." Those men might return with friends. As they made their way through rain-slicked streets, Ethan found himself thinking that for the first time in years, something truly unpredictable had happened in his meticulously controlled life. And for reasons he couldn't explain, that thought didn't irritate him as much as it should have. Chapter 2. The Devil's Bargain. The Marshall Tech Empire headquarters dominated Manhattan's skyline. 68 floors of gleaming steel and glass that seemed to touch the clouds. In the penthouse boardroom, Ethan Marshall stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, hands clasped behind his back as the morning light cast sharp shadows across his angular face. "The Nakamura Group has concerns about your personal reputation, Ethan," said Gregory Stone, the silver-haired chairman of the board. Ethan turned, his expression betraying nothing as he surveyed the 12 board members seated around the massive marble table. "My personal life has nothing to do with my ability to run this company," he stated coldly. "It does when we're dealing with the Japanese," Margaret Lane countered, adjusting her designer glasses. "The Nakamura family values tradition and stability. They view business as an extension of family. Your revolving door of models and actresses doesn't inspire confidence in your commitment to anything long-term." Ethan's jaw tightened. The $5 billion merger with Nakamura Tech represented everything he'd worked toward: global dominance in the medical technology sector, and final vindication against his brother, who had stolen everything from him once before. "So, what exactly are you suggesting?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Gregory slid a folder across the table. "Either present a stable to committed relationship during these negotiations, or we recommend Nakamura look elsewhere. You have 1 week to solve this problem." The meeting adjourned, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts. The memory of Nora Vale had lingered in his mind far longer than it should have. After seeking shelter in her tiny apartment during the storm, he'd been grudgingly impressed by her dignity amid poverty. The space had been meticulously cleaned despite the peeling paint. Books lined every available surface, and the walls were covered with breathtaking paintings. All her work, as he'd learned when her niece proudly informed him. He'd only stayed an hour, but something about her fierce pride and gentle care for both the homeless veteran and her niece had stayed with him. Upon leaving, he'd tried to offer money for her hospitality. The flash of insulted pride in her eyes had been fascinating. How many people would refuse cash from a billionaire? That evening, Ethan descended to the service levels of Marshall Tower in his private elevator. Raised voices from the janitorial office caught his attention. "I said, no, Tom," for the 100th time. Ethan recognized that voice immediately, the same musical quality with steel underneath. Peering around the corner, he saw Nora Vale in a cleaner's uniform, her hair pulled back in a practical bun, as she attempted to step around a heavy-set man blocking the doorway. "Come on, Nora. 1 drink. I'm your supervisor. I can make your life easier," the man said, reaching for her face. Ohara. Ethan's hands curled into fists. He hadn't realized she worked in his building. Touch me, and you'll pull back a stump, Nora said, the exact phrase she'd used with the thugs in her neighborhood. Now move. I have floors to clean before my shift ends. You know what? Don't bother. You're fired. Clean out your locker. Ethan started forward, then stopped himself. Revealing his presence would only complicate things for her. She clearly wasn't the type to welcome a white knight, and being recognized by the CEO would raise questions about how they knew each other. Only when she passed did he step into the supervisor's office. Tom Baxter, isn't it? Ethan said quietly. The man nearly jumped out of his skin. Mr. Marshall, Seer, how can I help you? You can help me by clearing out your desk. You're fired. As Baxter stammered protests, Ethan was already walking away. His mind racing. Seeing Nora again had cemented his plan. He needed someone for a convincing relationship charade. Someone intelligent enough to hold conversations with Japanese executives, dignified enough to impress old money societies, yet desperate enough to agree to his terms without emotional complications. Someone exactly like Nora Vale. 3 days later, Nora stumbled up the crumbling concrete steps to her apartment building, exhaustion weighing her down after a double shift at the hospital cafeteria. Losing the cleaning job at Marshall Tower had been devastating to her carefully balanced budget. Inside her dingy one-bedroom apartment, Lila was curled up on their fold-out sofa bed, fast asleep, with a book still clutched in her hands. Mrs. Harper from down the hall sat beside her, knitting. She's got a bit of a fever, the elderly woman whispered. Her breathing sounded rough earlier. Nora's chest tightened. Thank you for watching her, Mrs. Harper. When the door closed, Nora sank onto the edge of the bed, clutching an unopened envelope from the housing authority. She brushed Lila's forehead with her lips, confirming the fever. Auntie, Lila murmured, opening her eyes. You're home. I'm home. Little star. How are you feeling? My chest hurts. Lila admitted, but I finished my book. Nora reached for the inhaler on the nightstand, helping Lila take a puff. This should help. She finally opened the envelope while Lila dozed off again. 2 notices fell out. An eviction warning for late rent. Worse, a letter from Child Protective Services requesting a home inspection following an anonymous report about unsuitable living conditions. Nora's hands began to shake. If CPS decided their apartment was inadequate, they could take Lila away. A knock at the door startled her. It was past 11. No one in this neighborhood made social calls this late. Through the peephole, she was shocked to see Ethan Marshall standing in her hallway, and immaculate in a charcoal suit. Despite the late hour, she opened the door just enough to look through the crack, keeping the security chain in place. Mr. Marshall, are you lost again? His lips curved slightly. No, Miss Vale. This time I'm exactly where I intend to be. How did you find me? I make it my business to find things. May I come in? I have a proposition for you. A proposition at 11:30 at night. A business proposition, he clarified. One that could solve your current financial difficulties. A coughing fit from inside the apartment interrupted her response. Lila's breathing had become more labored, the wheezing audible even through the door. Concern flashed across Ethan's previously impassive face. Your niece sounds like she needs medical attention. Nora hesitated only a moment before closing the door to release the chain. Then reopening it. Wait here. Lila's lips had taken on a bluish tinge, her breathing increasingly strained despite the inhaler treatment. Panic rose in Nora's throat. The emergency room visit would cost hundreds. They didn't have, but Lila's health came first. When she turned to grab her purse, she found Ethan already inside. Assessing the situation, she needs a hospital, he said, pulling out his phone. I'll have my driver here in 3 minutes. True to his word, a sleek black SUV appeared below her window. Moments later, Ethan led the way downstairs, clearing a path through the dingy hallway, as if he was still in his corporate tower. Children's Hospital. He instructed his driver. Use the lights. As they sped through the night, Nora cradled Lila against her, whispering reassurances. Why are you helping us? She finally asked. Let's just say I'm investing in our future discussion. Besides, I dislike owing debts. You don't owe us anything for letting you wait out a storm. His emerald green eyes met hers. I never said the debt was to you. At the hospital, Ethan strode to the reception desk and, with a few quiet words and a flash of a platinum card, had specialists rushing toward them. They're prepping a private room. He informed her. The head of pediatric pulmonology is on his way in. He can't afford consider it handled. He cut her off. I don't accept charity. Good. Because I don't offer it. What I'm offering is a business arrangement, one that would ensure Lila receives the best medical care available, that you keep custody of her, and that you never have to worry about money again. Nora crossed her arms. What exactly are you proposing? Mr. Marshall, $2 million, he said bluntly, tax-free for 1 year of your time. Her eyes widened. Excuse me, I need someone to pose as my committed girlfriend for a business deal. Someone intelligent, dignified, and without existing social connections that might complicate things. His eyes swept over her, not leeringly, but with clinical assessment. You need money and stability for your niece. I'm offering both. You want to buy me? Her voice was incredulous. I want to hire you for a specific role. Nothing illegal. Nothing explicit. Public appearances, business dinners, cultural events. Playing the part of a woman who has somehow captured the interest of New York's most notorious bachelor. Anursa appeared, gesturing for Nora to follow her to Lila's room. Why me? You could hire an actress or model. Ethan's expression remained impassive. Because you're the only woman I've met who looked at me like I was nothing special. That kind of authenticity can't be faked, and it's exactly what I need to convince the people I'm trying to impress. He handed her a business card with a handwritten number on the back. That's my private line. Call me when Lila is stable, and you're ready to discuss terms. As Nora walked away, Ethan watched her retreating figure. For the first time in years, he felt a flicker of uncertainty. He needed this arrangement to work. His company's future depended on it. What he hadn't anticipated was the unsettling awareness that, for reasons he couldn't fully explain, he needed Nora Vale to say yes in a way that had nothing to do with business at all. Chapter 3. Worlds Collide. Nora stood frozen in the entryway of Ethan Marshall's penthouse. Lila's small hand clutched tightly in hers. The morning sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a space larger than her entire apartment building. Sleek furniture in shades of gray and black created a landscape of sharp angles and chrome accents. No personal photographs adorned the walls, but only expensive abstract art that conveyed nothing of their owner's personality. It looks like a museum, Lila whispered. Are we allowed to touch stuff? Nora squeezed her niece's hand. I'm not sure. Little star. 5 days had passed since that night at the hospital. 5 days since Ethan Marshall had made his outrageous proposition. Nora had initially dismissed it as the entitled fantasy of a billionaire who thought everything had a price tag, but then reality had set in. The eviction notice, the CPS investigation, Lila's medical bills, and the specialist's recommendation that Lila needed consistent care for her severe asthma. The devil's bargain had started to look like her only option. Miss Vale. The cool voice came from behind them. Nora turned to find Ethan watching them from the doorway, his tall frame impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit, despite it being Saturday. Mr. Marshall, she acknowledged, lifting her chin. His gaze shifted to Lila, softening fractionally. How are you feeling, Miss Lila? The little girl straightened her shoulders, mimicking her aunt's posture. Better. Thank you. The doctor said my lungs sound clearer. A ghost of a smile touched Ethan's lips before vanishing. Good. He gestured to a silent woman who had materialized beside him. This is Mrs. Lynn, my housekeeper. She'll show you to the guest wing. Guest wing. Nora Echoed. The east side of the penthouse. It has its own living area, 2 bedrooms, and a study. I thought you and Lila might prefer the privacy. Nora blinked, surprised by his consideration. Thank you. That's thoughtful. It's practical, he corrected, as if kindness were a weakness he couldn't admit to. Mrs. Lynn, please get them settled. I have calls to make. The guest wing proved to be larger than any apartment Nora had ever lived in. Lila gasped with delight at her bedroom, a space designed with a child in mind, complete with a window seat overlooking Central Park, bookshelves filled with classics, and a canopy bed. Did Mr. Marshall do this for me? Lila asked, running her fingers over the spines of brand new books. Mrs. Lynn's expression remained neutral. Mr. Marshall instructed the designer to create an appropriate space for an 8-year-old girl who enjoys reading. The books were delivered yesterday. Nora felt a confusing twist in her chest. The man who had coldly offered to buy her companionship had also taken the time to prepare a perfect sanctuary for her niece. Your room is through here. Miss Vale. Mrs. Lynn continued, opening double doors to reveal a sophisticated bedroom in shades of deep sapphire and cream. Mr. Marshall has arranged for a styling team to arrive at 1:00 to begin your transformation. My what? Nora's head snapped up. Your transformation. Hair, makeup, wardrobe consultations. Mr. Marshall left instructions that you are to be made presentable for tonight's charity gala. Nora's momentary gratitude evaporated. Of course, he did. Heaven forbid I embarrass the great Ethan Marshall with my discount store clothes. Mrs. Lynn's expression didn't change, but something like sympathy flickered in her eyes. I will return at 12:30 to collect Miss Lila for lunch. You may wish to rest before the stylists arrive. They can be intense. The stylists were worse than intense. They were brutal. By 2:00, Nora sat rigidly in a chair in the penthouse's enormous dressing room, surrounded by 3 fashion industry professionals who spoke about her as if she weren't present. The bone structure is actually quite remarkable, said Julian, the rail-thin stylist, with a shock of white hair. But darling, those eyebrows need serious intervention. And the hair, sighed Elisa, tugging at Nora's natural curls, so damaged from those box dyes, we'll need to completely restructure it. The bigger issue is the wardrobe, declared Luca, holding up her best dress, a simple black sheath she'd worn to her sister's funeral, between 2 fingers as if it might contaminate him. This is, well, there are no words. Nora's cheeks burned with humiliation. These clothes came from Target and JCPenney clearance racks. Some of us shop where we can afford to shop, not where we'd prefer. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Well, Julian finally said with a forced smile, that's all in the past now, isn't it? By the time we're finished with you, no one will believe you weren't born with a silver spoon in your perfect mouth. I don't want people to think I was born with a silver spoon, Nora replied, standing up. I'm proud of where I come from and what I've survived. That's all very inspirational. Darling, Elise said condescendingly, but Mr. Marshall was explicit about your presentation requirements. You need to look like you belong in his world. And what exactly does that entail? A deep voice asked from the doorway. All 3 stylists froze as Ethan entered the dressing room, his cold gaze sweeping over the scene. Mr. Marshall, Julian gushed. We were just discussing the comprehensive renovation needed to make Miss Vale suitable for. For what? Ethan interrupted, his voice dangerously soft. For being seen with me, for being photographed at my side. Well, yes, Luca stammered. The dress she brought isn't remotely appropriate for tonight's gala. Miss Vale doesn't need renovating. Ethan cut in, his eyes never leaving Nora's face. She doesn't need restructuring or reinventing. You're all fired. What? Elisa gasped. You heard me. Get out. Ethan's tone left no room for argument. Send your invoices for the time spent here today. Then find other clients to insult. When the door closed behind them, Ethan and Nora were left alone in the cavernous dressing room. Why did you do that? She asked quietly. Ethan walked to the rack where her dress hung, running the fabric between his fingers. Because they're idiots. You don't need changing. The clothes adapt to you, not the reverse. Nora blinked in surprise. It was perhaps the first genuinely nice thing he'd said to her. I thought you wanted me to look like I belong in your world, she said, echoing Elise's words. His eyes met hers, unexpectedly intense. My world is full of people who spend fortunes trying to look interesting. You're interesting without trying. He cleared his throat, as if realizing he'd revealed too much. Besides, authenticity is what I'm paying for. Those 3 would have erased everything genuine about you. Ethan pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. I've contacted Victoria Lynn. She's the best stylist in the city, but also the most discreet. She'll bring options that complement you, rather than transform you. In the meantime, I'd like you to join me for tea. Tea, Nora repeated, feeling off balance from the rapid shift in his demeanor. Yes, tea. A beverage often served with small sandwiches. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. We have a contract, but we're virtual strangers. If we're going to convince people we're in a relationship, we should at least know the basics about each other. 30 minutes later, Nora sat across from Ethan in his private study, a delicate china teacup balanced in her hands. The room was different from the rest of the penthouse. Warmer somehow, with walls lined with books and leather chairs that showed signs of actual use. Your niece is with Mrs. Lynn in the kitchen making cookies. Ethan informed her. She appears to be adapting well. Lila adapts to everything, Nora said with a small smile. She's had to. Ethan studied her over the rim of his cup. Tell me about her parents, Nora said, then reminded herself that this was part of the arrangement, sharing personal information to make their charade convincing. My sister Elise was brilliant, full scholarship to NYU, studying neuroscience. She got pregnant with Lila during her final year. Nora swallowed hard. Brain aneurysm when Lila was 4. I was in art school then. I dropped out to take care of Lila. And your parents? Car accident. When I was 17. Elise was 19. We bounced around foster care until she aged out and could take me in. So, you've been taking care of others your whole life. Ethan observed. Nora shrugged. That's what family does. His eyes darkened momentarily. Not all families. What about yours? She asked. Ethan's posture stiffened. My mother lives in Connecticut. We speak quarterly, primarily about her charitable foundation commitments. My father died 10 years ago. I have a brother, Lucas. We're not in contact. Nora sensed there was much more to that story, but Ethan's closed expression warned against probing deeper. So, this charity gala tonight, what exactly is expected of me? The annual Crestwood Foundation Gala, supporting children's medical research, Ethan explained, seemingly relieved by the shift to business. Woo. 000, a plate, black tie. You'll meet various business associates, politicians, socialites. Most importantly, Hiroshi Nakamura and his wife Aiko will be there. They're the Japanese tech moguls I need to impress. And how do we explain our sudden relationship? Nora asked practically. I've had my PR team plant a story that we've been dating discreetly for months. Your background has been adjusted for public consumption. Adjusted how? You're still Nora Vale, still Lila's guardian, but officially, you're a successful art consultant who specializes in discovering emerging talent from underprivileged communities. Nora raised an eyebrow. Creative. It's close enough to the truth to be believable. You do have artistic talent. I saw your paintings. And you'll need a plausible career that explains your schedule flexibility. The intercom buzzed. Mr. Marshall. Miss. Lynn has arrived with the wardrobe selections. Send her to the guest wing. Ethan instructed. I have work to finish before tonight. He rose as well. Mr. Marshall, thank you for firing those stylists. And for creating such a beautiful room for Lila. He paused at the door, his expression carefully neutral. Don't thank me. Miss Vale. This is a business arrangement. Nothing more. My priority is ensuring you can perform your role effectively. Comfortable accommodations and appropriate styling are simply practical considerations. The warmth that had been building between them cooled instantly. Of course, Nora replied stiffly. Practical considerations. I won't forget my place in this arrangement again. Something flashed in Ethan's eyes regret, perhaps before his mask of indifference returned. Bah. Ling. We leave at 8. The ballroom of the Plaza Hotel glittered with crystal chandeliers and the jewelry of New York's elite. Nora stood at the entrance beside Ethan, her heart racing beneath the sophisticated simplicity of her gown. A deep sapphire silk that Victoria Lynn had selected. Ready. Ethan murmured, his large hand settling at the small of her back. As I'll ever be, Nora replied, trying to ignore the warmth of his touch through the thin silk. The contract she had signed that afternoon was clear. $2 million for 1 year of pretending to be in love with Ethan Marshall. No actual physical relationship required. But the appearance of genuine affection was essential. Nothing in their contract explained the jolt of electricity she felt as they entered the ballroom together, his Tim hand guiding her protectively through the crowd. Ethan, there you are, called a statuesque blonde, air kissing both his cheeks. Everyone's been wondering if you'd grace us with your presence tonight. Wouldn't miss it. Sophia. Ethan replied smoothly. May I introduce Nora Vale? My girlfriend. Sophia's eyebrows rose fractionally. Girlfriend. How unexpected. Her gaze swept over Nora assessingly. I don't believe we've met in the circuit before. To dear. Nora prefers substance over socializing, Ethan said before Nora could respond. She's been instrumental in launching several artists from her community development programs. How fascinating. Sophia replied with practiced enthusiasm. You must tell me all about your community work. The condescension in her tone sparked something in Nora. I'd love to. Sophia, have you ever been to the Art Space Gallery in Brooklyn? They're featuring an extraordinary exhibition on urban expression that challenges conventional perspectives on worth and beauty. Sophia blinked, clearly surprised by Nora's articulate response. I can't say that I have. You should visit. It might expand your definition of art beyond what matches your sofa. Nora maintained her pleasant smile while delivering the subtle barb. Ethan's hand tightened slightly on her waist, but when she glanced up, she caught a rare flash of amusement in his eyes. As the evening progressed, Nora found herself surprisingly at ease navigating Ethan's world. Her genuine interest in art and literature gave her common ground with many of the guests. While her direct honesty provided a refreshing contrast to the practiced social niceties around her, she was discussing a recent exhibition with the director of the Metropolitan Museum when Ethan appeared at her side, tension evident in the set of his shoulders. "The Nakamuras have arrived," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "This is why you're here. Follow my lead." He guided her across the room to where an elegant Japanese couple stood conversing with the mayor. Hiroshi Nakamura was smaller than Ethan, but carried himself with unmistakable authority. His wife, Aiko, exuded graceful sophistication in a traditional kimono reimagined as a modern evening gown. "Nakamura-san, Aiko-san." Ethan greeted them with a respectful bow. "It's an honor to have you join us tonight, Marshal-san." Nakamura returned the bow. "We were just discussing your generous donation to tonight's cause. Children's medical research is a priority for both Nora and me." Ethan replied, drawing her closer to his side. "May I introduce Nora Vale, my partner?" Nora bowed as Victoria had coached her. "It's a pleasure to meet you both." Aiko studied her with intelligent eyes. "Marshal-san has never brought a partner to business functions before. You must be very special." The directness of the statement caught Nora off guard. She glanced at Ethan, seeing the subtle tension in his jaw. The connection was unexpected. Nora replied honestly, finding refuge in the partial truth. "Sometimes the most meaningful relationships come when we least anticipate them." Something in her response seemed to satisfy Aiko, whose eyes crinkled slightly at the corners. "Yes, exactly. So the arranged matches often fail, while the unexpected ones flourish. My own marriage was quite scandalous in its time, a businessman's daughter choosing a young entrepreneur over her father's choice." Hiroshi smiled fondly at his wife. 40 years later, her father finally admitted his mistake. As the conversation flowed easily between them, Nora felt Ethan's tension gradually easing. His hand remained at her back, his thumb occasionally tracing small circles against her silk-covered spine, a gesture that seemed almost unconscious, yet sent warmth spiraling through her. Later that night, as their car glided through the sleeping city back toward Ethan's penthouse, Nora found herself unexpectedly content. The evening had been exhausting but exhilarating in its way. "You were remarkable tonight," Ethan said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence. The Nakamuras were impressed, particularly Aiko. "She's quite perceptive," Nora observed. "Very, which makes your performance all the more valuable." Ethan's gaze was unreadable in the dim light of the car. "You've more than earned your first installment." The reminder of their arrangement, of the cold financial transaction at the heart of their evening, stung more than Nora had expected. For a few hours, amid the glittering lights and flowing champagne, she had almost forgotten this wasn't real. "Thank you," she replied formally. "I'm glad the investment is paying off." Something like regret flashed across Ethan's face before his usual mask returned. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we have brunch with the mayor and his wife. The real work is just beginning." As Nora lay in her new bedroom later that night, listening to the unfamiliar silence of luxury, no sirens, no arguing neighbors, no radiator clanking, she wondered what she had gotten herself into. Playing Ethan Marshall's lover for a year had seemed straightforward when desperation clouded her judgment. Now, with the memory of his hand on her back and the rare glimpses of humanity beneath his cold exterior, she feared the lines between performance and reality might blur dangerously before their contract ended. Chapter 4. Behind Closed Doors. The charity gala had been a stunning success. As Ethan's elevator ascended to his penthouse, Nora leaned against the mirrored wall, exhaustion finally claiming her now that they were alone. Her feet ached from hours in the designer heels Victoria had insisted matched her sapphire gown perfectly. "You were remarkable tonight," Ethan said quietly. Loosening his bow tie, Nora glanced at him, surprised by the genuine admiration in his voice. The Nakamuras seemed impressed, particularly Aiko. Ethan's eyes met hers in the mirrored wall. "She told me you have an old soul with honest eyes." High praise from a woman who believes most Americans are superficial. The elevator doors slid open to the darkened penthouse. Mrs. Lin had left a single lamp burning in the vast living room, its soft glow barely penetrating the shadows. "Lila will be asleep," Nora murmured, slipping off her heels with a sigh of relief. "I had Mrs. Lin move her to your room when she fell asleep," Ethan informed her, shrugging out of his tuxedo jacket. "She had a nightmare earlier." Concern instantly replaced Nora's fatigue. "Is she okay? Why didn't you call me?" "Mrs. Lin handled it, and I didn't want to pull you away from the Nakamuras." He walked to the bar and poured himself 2 fingers of scotch. "Would you like a drink?" "No. Thank you. I should check on Lila." Ethan nodded, taking a slow sip of his scotch. The amber liquid caught the low light as he swirled it. His expression distant. "You know, I've attended that gala for 7 consecutive years, and tonight was the first time it didn't feel like an obligation." Nora paused, something in his tone making her linger despite her concern for Lila. "Why is that?" "Because you made it real." He met her gaze directly. "When you spoke about those children's art programs, you weren't networking or posturing. You genuinely cared." "Of course, I care. Art saved me after my parents died." Nora replied, sitting on the arm of a nearby chair. Creative expression gives children control in a world where they often have none. Ethan studied her over the rim of his glass. "Most people in that room donate to causes because it's expected, not because they believe in them." "Then why do you donate?" "Practical business considerations. Philanthropic reputation is currency in certain circles." He finished his scotch in one swallow. "At least that's why I started." And now, a shadow crossed his face. "Now I'm not sure anymore." The vulnerability in his admission stirred something in Nora. This glimpse of uncertainty seemed far more genuine than the confident CEO persona he presented to the world, as if sensing he'd revealed too much. Ethan poured another drink, his movements more abrupt. "You should get some rest. Tomorrow, the real work begins. The Nakamuras have invited us to a traditional tea ceremony followed by dinner with their daughter." Nora stood, recognizing his retreat behind business formalities. "Good night, then." She had nearly reached the hall leading to the guest wing when his voice stopped her. "Nora." She turned. Ethan stood framed against the city lights, his powerful silhouette softened by the shadows. "Thank you," he said simply, "for tonight." Something in his tone, a roughness that hadn't been there before, made her heart skip. "I was just fulfilling our contract." "No." He shook his head slowly. "What you did tonight went beyond our agreement. You didn't just play a part. You made people believe in us." With that, he turned away, effectively dismissing her. 3 hours later, Nora jerked awake to the sound of breaking glass. Beside her, Leela slept peacefully, undisturbed by the noise. Nora slipped from the bed, pulling on a silk robe Victoria had included in her new wardrobe. Following the sound, she padded barefoot down the darkened hallway toward Ethan's wing of the penthouse, an area she hadn't yet explored. A sliver of light spilled from beneath a partially opened door. "Damn it," she heard Ethan mutter, followed by another crash. Concern overrode her hesitation. She pushed the door open to find Ethan in what appeared to be a home office, surrounded by broken glass. A framed photograph lay shattered on the floor beside an upended chair. Ethan himself stood by the window, his back to her, shoulders rigid with tension. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. He spun around, surprise quickly masked by annoyance. "You shouldn't be in here." Nora took in the scene, the tumbler of scotch in his hand, the disheveled hair suggesting he'd been running his fingers through it repeatedly, the wild look in his usually controlled eyes. "I heard breaking glass," she explained, stepping carefully around the shards. "I was worried." "Well, don't be. I'm fine." He knocked back the remaining scotch. "Just a bad dream." Nora glanced at the broken picture frame. From her angle, she could make out a younger Ethan standing beside another man with similar features, presumably the brother he'd mentioned not being in contact with. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked. "About what?" "How my brother slept with my fiancée the night before our wedding." The crude words seemed torn from him against his will. "Or how they're married now with a kid on the way." "Which part would you like to discuss, Miss Vale?" The bitterness in his voice was raw, revealing wounds far deeper than his controlled exterior suggested. "I'm sorry," she said simply. Ethan laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "Don't be. It taught me a valuable lesson about trust and family. Both are liabilities in this world." He poured another scotch, his movements slightly unsteady. Nora realized he was more intoxicated than she'd initially thought. "How long ago?" she asked gently. 2 years. 4 months. 16 days. He raised his glass in a mock toast. "Not that I'm counting." Nora approached him carefully, too aware she was treading on dangerous ground. In the dim light, with his defenses lowered by alcohol and nightmares, Ethan looked almost human, vulnerable in a way she hadn't thought possible. "You should get some sleep," she suggested. "The Nakamuras." "Fuck the Nakamuras," Ethan interrupted, moving closer to her. "Fuck the merger. Fuck the company." His emerald green eyes locked onto hers with unsettling intensity. "Do you know why I picked you?" "Nora." The sudden shift made her wary. "Because I need the money." "Because you're real." He reached out, his fingers brushing a curl from her face with surprising gentleness. "Everyone else in my world is playing a part. But you stand in a room full of people with 10 times your net worth and challenge them without blinking. His touch lingered on her cheek, sending an unwelcome warmth through her body. The contract explicitly prohibited any romantic involvement, yet here, in the shadows, with his guard down, something dangerous sparked between them. "You're drunk," she said softly, stepping back. "Not drunk enough to forget our arrangement," he replied, a bitter edge returning to his voice, "but drunk enough to wonder what it would be like if this wasn't just business." His gaze dropped to her lips. "If we hadn't signed all those papers with all those rules." Before she could respond, he closed the distance between them, one hand cupping her cheek. "We should practice," he murmured. "For authenticity's sake, the Nakamuras will expect us to look like we're in love." His face was inches from hers. His breath, warm against her lips, was scotch-scented, but not unpleasant. For one dizzying moment, Nora found herself leaning into his touch, curiosity and attraction, warring with her better judgment. Then his words registered for authenticity's sake and reality crashed back. This wasn't about her. She was merely a prop in his business deal. Nothing more. The sting of his casual objectification broke the spell. Nora pulled away. Then, on instinct, slapped him hard across the face. The sharp sound seemed to shock them both. "I won't be used to bandage your emotional wounds," she said, her voice steady, despite the trembling in her limbs. "I agreed to play a part in public, not to be your private therapy session." Ethan stared at her, a red mark blooming on his cheek. Rather than the anger she expected, something like respect flickered in his eyes. Then shame. "You're right," he said finally, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. "That was inappropriate." He apologized. The formal words seemed inadequate after the intensity of the moment, yet Nora sensed they represented a rare concession for him. "Get some sleep," she repeated, moving toward the door. "And drink some water. Those Japanese tea ceremonies are brutal with a hangover." She was almost to the hallway when his voice stopped her again. "Would it have been different?" he asked quietly. "If we'd met some other way," Nora posed, her back to him. "Maybe," she admitted, "but we didn't. Good night, Mr. Marshall." As she walked back to her room, Nora tried to ignore the lingering warmth where his fingers had touched her skin. This arrangement was already complicated enough without adding unwanted attraction to the mix. In her bedroom, she slipped back beside Lila, drawing comfort from her niece's peaceful breathing. The little girl had been through so much already. Nora couldn't risk their security by developing genuine feelings for a man who viewed emotions as weaknesses and relationships as business transactions. Yet, as sleep finally claimed her, Nora couldn't quite forget the glimpse of real pain she'd seen in Ethan Marshall's eyes, or the treacherous way her heart had responded to it. Chapter 5. Cracks in the Armor. Morning sunlight filtered through the traditional rice paper screens of the Japanese tea house, casting delicate patterns across the tatami mats. Nora knelt beside Ethan, trying to maintain the proper formal posture despite the pins and needles developing in her legs. Across from them, Hiroshi and Aiko Nakamura watched with subtle scrutiny as the tea master performed the centuries-old ceremony with meticulous precision. Ethan's demeanor betrayed no hint of his drunken vulnerability from the night before. Dressed in an impeccable charcoal suit, he appeared entirely at ease in the formal setting, his face a mask of respectful interest. Only Nora, hyper-aware of him after their encounter. He noticed the slight tension in his jaw, and the careful way he avoided direct eye contact with her. "Marshall-san," Nakamura said quietly as the tea master presented the matcha, "your partner adapts well to our customs." Ethan inclined his head. Nora has always embraced cultural experiences with genuine appreciation. Nora accepted the earthenware bowl with both hands, performing the customary 3 turns before sipping as Victoria had coached her during their rushed morning preparation. The bitter green tea coated her tongue, but she maintained her serene expression. "You have studied our traditions," Aiko observed with approval. "I believe understanding traditions helps us connect across differences," Nora replied. The words came naturally despite her nervousness about saying the wrong thing. Aiko's eyes sparkled with interest, a thoughtful perspective. "How long have you and Marshall-san been together?" Nora felt Ethan stiffen imperceptibly beside her. They had rehearsed their story, but this direct question from Aiko seemed designed to test them. "We've known each other for 8 months," Nora answered, allowing a small, affectionate smile to form. "Though Ethan kept our relationship private initially, he's protective of his personal life." "Understandable. With the media attention you receive." Hiroshi nodded to Ethan. "Though I must admit, we were surprised. Your reputation suggested you preferred more temporary arrangements." The delicate challenge hung in the air. Ethan's hand found Nora's, his fingers intertwining with hers in a practiced motion. They had rehearsed. "I valued my independence until I met someone worth changing for," Ethan replied smoothly. The practiced line sounded almost sincere as his thumb brushed over her knuckles. Aiko studied their joined hands, then Nora's face. "And what drew you to Marshall San?" Nora-san. Beyond the obvious advantages of his position, the question pierced through the polite facade, revealing Aiko's true concern. Was Nora just another gold digger attaching herself to one of the world's most eligible bachelors? Instead of reciting their prepared answer, Nora found herself responding honestly. "His contradictions," she said softly. "The world sees only his success and strength. I noticed how he stops to help when no one is watching." She thought of how he'd intervened with the thugs in her neighborhood, fired the stylists who had belittled her, ensured Lila had a room filled with book-small moments that revealed glimpses of a better man than he pretended to be. Ethan's hand tightened around hers, genuine surprise flashing in his eyes before he masked it. Something in her response seemed to satisfy Aiko, who nodded and returned to the ceremony. As they completed the ritual, Nora caught the woman exchanging a meaningful glance with her husband. Whatever test they'd administered, she sensed they had passed. At least for now. That was unexpected, Ethan said as they rode the elevator to the hotel suite where they would change for dinner with the Nakamuras and their daughter. "What was?" Nora asked, though she knew exactly what he meant. "Your answer to Aiko about why you're with me." He studied her profile. "It wasn't what we rehearsed." Nora shrugged, keeping her eyes on the ascending floor numbers. "It seemed more authentic." "Isn't authenticity what you're paying for?" Ethan flinched slightly at the reminder of their arrangement. "Yes, but Mr. Marshall," she interrupted, finally turning to face him. "About last night. It won't happen again." He cut in, his expression closing off. "I was intoxicated and inappropriate. It has no bearing on our agreement." The elevator doors opened before she could respond, revealing an ornate hotel corridor. In the suite, an awkward silence fell between them as they separated to prepare for dinner. Nora changed into the elegant navy dress Victoria had selected, trying not to dwell on the confusion swirling inside her. Last night, she'd seen beneath Ethan's carefully constructed facade to the wounded man beneath. Today, his walls were firmly back in place, higher and thicker than before. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Ethan on the phone, his back to her as he gazed out the window at the Manhattan skyline. "Make it happen," he was saying, his business voice cold and commanding. "I don't care what it costs. Just get it done before I return." He ended the call, turning to find her watching him. For a moment, he seemed frozen, his eyes taking in her appearance with an intensity that made her skin warm. "You look," he began, then cleared his throat. "The dress suits you." "Thank you." She approached cautiously. "Is everything okay?" That sounded serious. "Just business." He slipped his phone into his pocket. "The Taiwanese semiconductor supplier is trying to renegotiate terms. Nothing for you to worry about." The dismissive tone stung more than it should have. "Right. I'm just the arm candy. Not a business partner." Ethan frowned. "That's not." A knock at the door interrupted them. Ethan opened it to reveal a hotel manager with an urgent expression. "Mr. Marshall, I apologize for the intrusion, but there's a situation with a child downstairs asking for Miss Vale. She says her name is Lila." Nora's heart lurched. "Lila. She's supposed to be with Mrs. Lynn at the penthouse." They rushed downstairs to find Lila in the hotel lobby, her small face tear-streaked as she clutched Mrs. Lynn's hand. The normally composed housekeeper looked distressed. Lila had a severe asthma attack. "Mrs. Lynn explained hurriedly. "I tried calling, but neither of you answered. The doctor said she needs her new medication adjusted, so I brought her directly." Nora knelt before her niece, checking her breathing. "Are you okay?" "Little star." Lila nodded bravely, though her breathing still sounded labored. "I got scared," she admitted in a small voice. "The doctor said I should be with you." Ethan stepped forward, surprising them all by crouching down to Lila's level. "The doctor is right," he said, his voice gentler than Nora had ever heard it. "Your aunt should be with you." He glanced at his watch, then up at Nora. "The Nakamuras are expecting us in 20 minutes. "I'll cancel," Nora said immediately. "Lila needs me." "No." Ethan shook his head. "This dinner is crucial. The Nakamura's daughter will be there. They're testing how we interact as a couple with family present." He paused, his expression conflicted, then made a decision. "Mrs. Lynn, please take Lila upstairs to our suite. We'll order room service for her. I'll attend dinner alone and explain that Miss Vale is caring for her ill niece." Nora blinked in surprise. Won't that hurt the negotiations? Possibly, he admitted, but in Japanese culture, family obligations are respected above all. They'll understand. The concern in his voice seemed genuine, making her wonder yet again about the man beneath the CEO exterior. I can go, Leela said suddenly, straightening her small shoulders. I feel better now. And Mrs. Lin can stay with me at your table. She looked up at Ethan. I won't embarrass you. He promise. I know all the right forks to use. Ethan studied the child, something softening in his gaze. I have no doubt you do, Lila. But your health comes first. What if we compromise? Nora suggested, touched by both Lila's bravery and Ethan's unexpected consideration. We attend. Explain the situation. To stay for appetizers to be polite. Then excuse ourselves to care for Lila. Ethan nodded slowly. That could work. The gesture of appearing together, even briefly, would maintain the relationship image while demonstrating proper family priorities. Then it's settled, Nora said, rising. Lila, are you sure you're feeling well enough? The little girl nodded solemnly. I want to help. Ethan surprised them again by gently ruffling Lila's curls. You're quite the negotiator. Miss Lila, you might have a future at Marshall Tech. The child beamed at him, and something twisted in Nora's chest at the sight. The Nakamuras were remarkably understanding about their abbreviated dinner. Even more surprising was their daughter Suki's immediate rapport with Lila. The two girls chatted enthusiastically about books, while the adults discussed business over appetizers. Family health must always take priority, Hiroshi said approvingly when Ethan explained they would need to leave early. It speaks well of you both that you care for the child together. As they prepared to depart, Aiko took Nora aside. Children see truth that adults miss, she said cryptically, nodding toward Lila, who was laughing at something Ethan had said. Your niece trusts Marshall-san. This says more than any business proposal. Back in the hotel suite, Lila's breathing grew labored again. Despite her medication, Nora administered her inhaler, worry, creasing her brow. As the treatment seemed less effective than usual, should we take her to the hospital? She asked Ethan, who was on the phone, arranging for a doctor to come to the suite. The concierge is sending up the hotel's on-call physician, he replied, loosening his tie. He should be here in 10 minutes. While they waited, Lila's condition worsened. Her lips took on a bluish tinge that sent terror through Nora's veins. She can't wait 10 minutes, she said urgently. Without hesitation, Ethan scooped Lila into his arms. There's a private clinic 3 blocks away. My car is downstairs. They rushed through the hotel, Ethan carrying Lila, while Nora followed with the medical bag. In the car, Nora held her niece, whispering reassurances as Ethan directed his driver to speed through traffic. You'll be okay. Little star, she murmured, fighting her own panic. Just keep breathing for me. Lila gripped her hand weakly. I'm sorry. Auntie, she wheezed. I ruined your important dinner. You didn't ruin anything, Ethan said firmly from beside them. The Nakamuras were impressed by you, especially Suki. Even through her fear, Nora noted how naturally Ethan comforted the child with none of his usual emotional distance. At the clinic, Ethan's name opened doors immediately. Lila was whisked into a treatment room, leaving them in an empty waiting area. Nora paced anxiously, unable to stay still. She'll be fine, Ethan said, though tension lined his face. This clinic has the best pulmonologists in the city. How can you know that? Nora demanded, fear making her voice sharp. Because I researched every medical facility in Manhattan the night we signed our contract, he admitted quietly. Lila's medical history indicated recurring asthma episodes. I wanted to be prepared. Nora stopped pacing, stunned by this revelation. You researched Lila's medical needs before we even moved in. Ethan looked uncomfortable with her surprise. It was practical planning. Having a child with chronic health issues under my roof required due diligence. Before she could respond, a doctor emerged from the treatment room. Miss Vale, Lila is stabilized. We've adjusted her medication and would like to keep her overnight for observation. Relief weakened Nora's knees. Can I see her? Of course, she's asking for both of you. Actually, they found Lila in a private room that looked more like a hotel suite than a hospital ward, breathing easier with an oxygen cannula in her nose. Her small face brightened when she saw them. The doctor says I have to stay here tonight, she informed them solemnly, just for one night. Nora assured her, smoothing her curls. I'll stay right here with you. Both of you. Lila asked. Looking between them, Nora glanced at Ethan, expecting him to make excuses to leave. To her surprise, he nodded. Both of us, he confirmed. pulling a chair closer to the bed. I have nowhere more important to be, while Lila dozed, lulled by medication. Nora and Ethan sat on opposite sides of her bed in companionable silence. Outside the window, the city lights glittered against the night sky. "Thank you," Nora said softly. "For everything tonight." Ethan shook his head. "No need to thank me." "There is," she insisted. "You put Lila first, even knowing it might jeopardize your deal." He was quiet for a long moment. "Children should be protected," he finally said, his voice low. "They shouldn't suffer for adults' decisions." Something in his tone suggested personal experience, making Nora wonder again about his fractured family relationships. "You're good with her," she observed. "Have you been around children much?" "No." His answer was blunt. "My circle doesn't include many families." "You could have fooled me. Lila already adores you." Ethan looked genuinely startled by this information. "She doesn't know me." "Children have good instincts," Nora said, echoing Aiko's earlier comment. "They see past pretenses." His gaze dropped to Lila's peaceful face. Then she sees something even I don't recognize. The vulnerability in his admission created another crack in the armor he maintained. So carefully, Nora found herself reaching across the bed, her fingers brushing his hand where it rested near Lila's. Maybe she sees the man you could be, instead of the one you think you have to be. Ethan stared at their touching hands, then slowly turned his palm upward, allowing her fingers to rest against his. The simple contact felt more intimate than his attempted kiss the night before. "The man I could be," he repeated softly, as if testing a foreign concept. His eyes lifted to hers. The usual ice melted into something warmer. "And what man is that?" Nora, the use of her first name, spoken with such genuine curiosity, made her heart beat faster. She was treading dangerous ground again, but something compelled her to answer honestly. "Someone who doesn't equate vulnerability with weakness. Someone who remembers that success isn't measured by acquisition, but by connection." For a heartbeat, something raw and unguarded flashed across his face. Then his phone buzzed, shattering the moment. Ethan withdrew his hand to check the message, his expression instantly reverting to CEO mode. "The Nakamuras," he explained, standing abruptly. "They're concerned about Lila. I should update them." He stepped out of the room to make the call, leaving Nora to wonder if she had imagined the momentary connection between them. When he returned minutes later, his walls were firmly back in place. "I've arranged for us to stay here tonight," he informed her in a businesslike tone. "The adjoining room has been prepared. The specialist will see Lila first thing in the morning." "Ethan," Nora said softly, using his first name deliberately. "What just happened between us was nothing," he interrupted, not meeting her eyes. "Professional concern for a child under my temporary care. Nothing more." The dismissal stung more than it should have, reminding her forcefully of their contractual relationship. "Right," she said stiffly. "Just business." But as she watched him settle back into the chair, his eyes vigilant over Lila's sleeping form, Nora couldn't help wondering who he was trying harder to convince her or himself. Chapter 6. The Heart Beneath the Ice. 1 month after moving into Ethan's penthouse, Nora stood in his office, staring at an uncashed stack of her salary checks, totaling nearly $250. "Ling, why haven't you deposited these?" Ethan's voice startled her from the doorway, his piercing green eyes studying her intently. Nora met his gaze unflinchingly. "It feels wrong now. It's business." "Nora, our agreement, is it still just business?" She challenged softly. "When you look at me across the dinner table, when you help Lila with her homework at midnight, when your hand lingers on mine a moment too long, is that all business too?" Something flickered in Ethan's eyes, uncertainty. Perhaps, or a vulnerability he couldn't quite mask. Before he could respond, his phone chimed with an incoming message. "I have to leave," he said, retreating behind his professional demeanor. "The Nakamuras have invited us to their estate in Westchester this weekend for their daughter's birthday. Pack for overnight. Victoria will help with appropriate attire." As he turned to leave, Nora called after him. "I saw your car at the Children's Hospital yesterday when I was volunteering with my reading program. You were there for hours." Ethan froze, his back to her. "I had a meeting for 3 hours." He turned slowly, his expression carefully guarded. "I'm funding new research on childhood asthma treatments. Does that satisfy your curiosity?" The revelation touched something deep in her chest. "Why wouldn't you tell me that? Because it's not relevant to our arrangement? Or because you didn't want me to see that the ruthless CEO actually has a heart?" Nora stepped closer, watching emotions war across his face. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Don't mistake business interest for sentiment, Miss Vale. Medical technology is Marshall Tech's primary market. With that, He was gone, leaving Nora to wonder about the man beneath the armor, who kept revealing himself in small, unexpected moments of kindness. The Nakamura estate blended traditional Japanese architecture with the lush forests of upstate New York. On the balcony of their guest suite, Nora and Ethan watched Lila playing with Suki in the gardens below, their children's laughter drifting up on the evening breeze. The girls had become fast friends, Ethan observed, standing close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. In casual clothes-dark jeans and a light sweater, he looked younger, more approachable. The rigid CEO persona had softened at the edges, revealing glimpses of a different man. A sudden gust of wind scattered Nora's sketches from the nearby table, sending them fluttering over the balcony. Without hesitation, Ethan vaulted over the railing, dropping 10 feet to retrieve them before they could blow away. When he returned, slightly breathless, he handed her the recovered papers with surprising gentleness. "These are remarkable," he said, studying a drawing of Lila, reading. "You haven't mentioned your art since moving in. There hasn't been much time." "Make time," he said with unexpected firmness. "Talent like this shouldn't be neglected." Their moment was interrupted by Hiroshi Nakamura, entering with a warm smile. After discussing dinner arrangements, Hiroshi added, "I was sorry to learn of your estrangement from your brother, Marshall San. Family connections should be treasured, even through difficulties." Ethan's expression hardened instantly. "My family situation is private." After Hiroshi departed, Ethan remained rigidly still. How does he know about Lucas? Their background research must be thorough. Nora suggested, would reconciliation be so impossible? "You don't know what you're talking about," Ethan snapped, ice returning to his voice. "Then help me understand what happened with your brother that's so unforgivable." "He took everything that mattered," Ethan said, the words tearing free. After months of careful control, "Sophie, my fiancée." They'd been sleeping together for months while she planned our wedding. The night before our ceremony, I found them together in the house I'd bought for us. The raw pain in his voice made Nora reach for him instinctively. This time, he didn't pull away. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her hand resting gently on his arm. Ethan looked down at her touch, something shifting in his eyes. "We should get ready for dinner," he said, but his voice had lost its coldness. After an elegant dinner under the stars, their hosts retired early, leaving Ethan and Nora alone on their private garden terrace. Thunder rumbled in the distance as a storm approached. "You were remarkable tonight," Ethan said quietly, watching her in the moonlight. "The Nakamuras are completely convinced by us." "Are they convinced, or are they seeing something real?" Nora asked, gathering her courage to voice what had been building between them for weeks. Before Ethan could answer, lightning illuminated his face, revealing an unexpected vulnerability. Thunder followed, shaking the night as the storm broke around them. Nora turned to check on Lila, but Ethan caught her wrist gently. "Nora, wait." She looked back, finding his gaze intense, searching. If things were different, he began hesitantly. If we had met some other way, the rest of his question hung unspoken between them. But she understood. If they weren't bound by contract, if business and millions weren't involved, if they were just a man and woman drawn to each other. Ethan's hand moved to cup her cheek, his touch gentler than she would have thought possible from those powerful hands. Slowly, he leaned down until their lips were a breath apart. "Tell me to stop," he whispered, his voice rough with restrained desire. Nora knew she should. Their contract explicitly prohibited this crossing of lines. Yet in that moment, with rain drumming against the roof and lightning painting shadows across his face, she couldn't find the words. Instead, she closed the final distance between them, her lips meeting his in a kiss that started tentatively but quickly deepened, as years of his careful control crumbled beneath the simple truth of their connection. His arms enveloped her, strong yet reverent, as though she were precious and unexpected in his ordered world. When Ethan's hands began to wander lower, heat following in their wake, reality crashed back. Nora pulled away, breathless and confused. "Not like this," she whispered, her third rejection even more difficult than the previous ones. "Not until it's real." "What do you mean?" Confusion clouded his darkened eyes. "This, whatever is happening between USI, won't let it be part of our transaction. If we cross that line, it needs to be because we both want to, not because it's convenient for our charade." He stepped back, his walls visibly reconstructing. "Of course, I apologize for the confusion. Ethan, that's not what I—" "No need to explain." He cut her off, his voice cooling rapidly. "You're right to maintain professional boundaries." As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her one final time. "Nora." When she looked back, Vulnerability had returned to his eyes. For what it's worth, that was real. At least for me, the admission hung in the air between them, fragile and profound. Tears threatened as she whispered, "Then prove it, not with kisses or contracts. Prove it by letting someone see the real you, scars and all." She slipped into Lila's room, finding her niece awake and frightened by the storm. As Nora held the child close, Lila asked sleepily, "Is Ethan scared of storms, too?" Nora stroked her hair, thinking of the complex man on the other side of the door. "I think he's scared of things much bigger than storms." Chapter 7. Poison and Antidote. The final Nakamura merger negotiations were arranged for an intimate dinner at Kyoto, Manhattan's most exclusive Japanese restaurant. Ethan stood before his mirror, adjusting his tie with practiced precision, reviewing mental notes on the evening's critical objectives. Tonight was crucial. After 3 months of careful courtship, the Nakamuras were finally ready to sign preliminary agreements for their $5 billion partnership. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned, except for one significant variable: his growing feelings for Nora. Since their kiss 2 weeks ago, something fundamental had shifted between them. In public, their performance remained flawless, but in private, a new awareness charged the air whenever they occupied the same space. Ethan found himself noticing details he'd previously ignored: the scent of lavender that lingered after she left a room, the musical quality of her laughter when Lila said something clever, the way her eyes softened when she thought no one was watching. Most disturbing were the unfamiliar emotions these observations evoked. For the first time in his precisely ordered existence, the company wasn't his sole focus. The realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Nora appeared in the doorway, wearing a deep crimson dress that took his breath away. Her hair was swept up, exposing her elegant neck. Adorned with only the pearl earrings he'd given her last week a gift, he'd justified as maintaining their cover story. Though both knew it was something more, Lila wanted to wish you luck. She said, "She's in the living room with Rachel." In the living room, Lila looked up from her book, face brightening. "You look handsome," she declared with childish honesty. "Like a prince in my storybooks." Ethan crouched to her level, a gesture that would have seemed impossible 3 months ago. "Thank you. Miss Lila, what are you and Rachel planning tonight? Making a volcano for science class, then watching movies about horses. Sounds messy." Ethan observed, approval rather than criticism in his tone. "The best science is messy," Lila replied seriously, echoing words he'd once spoken. The realization that she remembered, that his casual comment had registered as something worth repeating, created an unfamiliar tightness in his chest. In the elevator descending to the garage, Nora studied him thoughtfully. "What?" he asked, discomforted by her scrutiny. "She adores you," Nora said simply. "You know that." "Right." Ethan adjusted his cufflinks, avoiding her gaze. "She's a child. Children are naturally trusting. Not Lila. Not after everything she's been through." Nora touched his arm lightly. "She sees something in you worth trusting, Ethan. Something genuine." Kyoto Restaurant occupied the top floor of a midtown skyscraper, offering panoramic views enhanced by traditional Japanese design. As they were escorted to the private dining room, a familiar voice sliced through the ambient conversation. "Ethan, is that really you?" Ethan froze mid-step. Sophie Bennett, now Sophie Marshall, after marrying his brother, approached with confident strides, her designer dress showcasing the polished beauty that had once captivated him. "Sophie," Ethan acknowledged stiffly. "I wasn't aware you were in New York. Lucas had business," she replied, her gaze sliding to Nora with calculated assessment. "Won't you introduce me to your friend?" Ethan's jaw tightened visibly. "Nora Valley. My partner, Nora. This is Sophie, my brother's wife." Sophie's handshake was dismissive. "Partner. How interesting. Ethan never struck me as the committed type during our time together." A Nakamura associate approached, offering temporary rescue. "Marshall-san, the Nakamuras are waiting in the private room." Sophie smiled with feline satisfaction. "Don't let me keep you, though perhaps I'll join you later. I'd love to hear more about this partnership of yours." As she sauntered away, Nora squeezed Ethan's arm. "She's trying to provoke you," she murmured. "Don't let her." The first hour of dinner progressed smoothly. Despite Ethan's tension, the Nakamuras were warm and engaging, clearly impressed by the rapport that had developed between their hosts. "You have changed, Marshall-san," Hiroshi observed. "There is a balance to you now that was missing when we first met." Ethan inclined his head politely. "Business success requires continuous evolution, not business. Aiko corrected with a gentle smile. The heart. Your spirit has softened since finding your partner. Before Ethan could respond, the door slid open to reveal Sophie carrying champagne. I hope you don't mind, she said with practiced charm. When I heard Ethan was celebrating, I thought a toast was in order. Ethan stood abruptly. This is a private dinner. Ethan, Hiroshi said mildly, a toast from family is always welcome. Trapped by Japanese courtesy, Ethan watched as Sophie introduced herself to the Nakamuras with flawless poise. I've known Ethan for years, she explained. In fact, we were engaged before I fell in love with his brother. Lucas, Aiko's eyebrows rose slightly, her gaze shifting between Sophie and Ethan with new interest. Ancient history, Ethan said dismissively, his knuckles white around his glass. Not so ancient, Sophie countered, and family is never history. Is it? Especially in Japanese culture, which is why I'm pleased Ethan has finally found someone, she continued smoothly. How exactly did you meet? Ethan's always been so private. The trap was obvious. Sophie suspected their relationship wasn't genuine. Nora met Ethan's eyes briefly, silently communicating her understanding. We met during a thunderstorm, she said truthfully. Ethan's car broke down in my neighborhood. I offered shelter. When did this shelter turn into a relationship? Sophie pressed. No one knew of your partnership until precisely when the Nakamura negotiations began, almost as if it were arranged for the occasion. The implication hung in the air. The Nakamura's expression shifted from warmth to uncertainty. Sophie, you've outstayed your welcome, Ethan said icily. Have I? Or have I recognized a business arrangement? After all, I know how you operate. Ethan, everything is ultimately a transaction to you. Hiroshi cleared his throat uncomfortably. Perhaps there has been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. Sophie interrupted. Just truth. Ask Ethan about his contract with Miss Vale. I'm sure the terms are quite generous for her services. Ethan stood abruptly. Enough. In the tense stillness that followed, Nora Madea decision. She reached for Ethan's hand, linking their fingers firmly. You're right about one thing, she said to Sophie. While looking at the Nakamuras, there was an arrangement initially. Ethan did offer me a contract. Aiko's expression fell. Disappointment évident. Hiroshi's face hardened into businesslike neutrality, but Nora continued, her voice steady. What began as business has become something neither of us expected. She turned to Ethan, whose expression had transformed from anger to disbelief. I haven't cashed a single check you've written me. Not one. What? He whispered, genuinely shocked. I couldn't, she admitted, because somewhere between pretending to care for you and actually caring, taking your money started to feel wrong. Sophie's triumphant smile faltered as the atmosphere shifted. You speak from the heart. Aiko observed. This is not performance. No, Nora acknowledged. Ethan offered me security when I desperately needed it. I agreed for my niece's sake, but I didn't expect to discover the man behind the CEO who funds research because a little girl got sick, who remembers how she likes her hot chocolate, who checks her homework after 18-hour workdays. Ethan stared at her, vulnerability flickering in his eyes. Hiroshi turned to him seriously. Is this true? Marshall-san, did your relationship begin as business? Ethan straightened his shoulders. Decision made. Yes, he said simply. I approached Nora with a proposition when I learned you valued family stability. It was calculating and manipulative. Sophie's eyes widened in surprise at his confession. But what I didn't anticipate, Ethan continued, his voice softening as he looked at Nora, was how much I would come to respect her integrity. How her presence would change my home from a place I merely slept to, somewhere I look forward to returning. His hand tightened around Nora's. The arrangement was real, but what developed between us wasn't in any contract. Aiko studied them both intently before smiling. Honesty at great risk. This, Marshall-san, is what we hope to see in a business partner. Not perfection, but authenticity. Hiroshi nodded in agreement. Deception discovered destroys trust forever. Truth freely offered builds stronger foundations. To everyone's surprise, he raised his glass. To relationships that transcend transactions, may our business partnership develop with similar authenticity. Sophie stood abruptly, her calculated attack having failed spectacularly. How touching, she said bitterly. I hope you're not making another mistake. Ethan. As she stalked away, Ethan didn't even glance in her direction. His eyes remained fixed on Nora's, a question in their green depths. Later that night, after the agreements were signed and they stood alone in the elevator ascending to the penthouse, Nora finally asked what had been on her mind since his confession. Did you mean what you said about our relationship Ethan turned to her, his carefully maintained walls completely absent. Every word. I tried to tell myself this was still just business, but it hasn't been for a long time. He touched her cheek gently. You've changed everything, Nora, and I'm terrified of what that means. The elevator doors opened to their home because somehow, in these months together, his sterile penthouse had indeed become a home. Lila's artwork decorated the refrigerator. Nora's paintings hung on walls that had previously showcased only cold, expensive abstracts. What are you afraid of? Nora asked softly. Ethan's answer was barely audible. Losing you. Both of you. When the contract ends, instead of responding with words, Nora reached up and drew his lips to hers, sealing her silent promise with a kiss that held no rejection this time. Only the beginning of something neither had anticipated when they'd signed their arrangement. Chapter 8. The Pursuit. These need to be delivered to Children's Memorial by this afternoon. Ethan told his assistant, handing over a large envelope. Make sure Dr. Chen receives them personally. 2 weeks had passed since the night at Kyoto restaurant. 2 weeks since Ethan and Nora had acknowledged that their arrangement had evolved into something genuine. The merger negotiations were proceeding smoothly, but Ethan found himself increasingly distracted by thoughts that had nothing to do with business. His phone buzzed with a message from Nora. Art therapy class went wonderfully. The children loved your donation. Dina Shu. Ethan found himself smiling. Another frequent occurrence these days when his assistant interrupted. Sir, there's someone here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he's insistent. Who is it? Your brother. See you. Lucas Marshall. Ethan's smile vanished instantly. Send him away. Ethan. Lucas's voice came from the doorway, deep and familiar. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Ethan looked up to find his brother standing there, the family resemblance unmistakable. Despite Lucas's slightly less full appearance, you have two, Ethan replied icily. When they were alone, Lucas approached cautiously. Sophie told me she saw you at Kyoto with someone, and I wanted to see if it was true. If you finally moved on. Ethan's jaw tightened. My personal life is none of your concern. Maybe not. Lucas agreed. But your company is. Marshall Tech was our father's legacy to both of us. I never wanted to be pushed out. You made your choice when you slept with my fiancée. Lucas flinched visibly. I know what I did was unforgivable, but I'm here because of rumors that Vanguard Investment is preparing a hostile takeover bid for Marshall Tech. They're targeting the period right after the Nakamura merger, when you'll be cash poor before the integration benefits kick in. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Vanguard was their most aggressive competitor. How do you know this? I still have connections in the industry, Lucas replied, and despite everything, you're still my brother. Brothers don't betray each other. No, Lucas admitted. They don't. I was weak and selfish, and I've paid for it every day since. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. Sophie and I are divorcing. She's been unfaithful multiple times. A cruel satisfaction flickered through Ethan before being replaced by something unexpectedly like pity. I'm offering my shares to help block the takeover. Lucas continued, laying the certificates on Ethan's desk. No conditions. As Lucas turned to leave, the office door opened to reveal Nora holding Lila's hand. Sorry to interrupt. She started, then froze at the sight of Lucas. The family resemblance was unmistakable. Nora's eyes moved between the brothers, understanding dawning in her expression. You must be Lucas, she said, her voice neutral. Lucas nodded, clearly surprised by her presence in Ethan's office. And you're Nora. Sophie mentioned you. His gaze shifted to Lila. And who might this be? I'm Lila, the child announced. Ethan is teaching me chess. Something like wistful recognition crossed Lucas's face. He taught me too when we were kids. He glanced back at Ethan. You were always a patient teacher. The compliment hung awkwardly in the air between them. We should go, Nora said, sensing the tension. We just stopped by to see if you wanted to join us for lunch. Lucas backed toward the door. I was just leaving. She's good for you. Ethan, I can see it already. After Lucas departed, Ethan slumped into his chair, the emotional impact of the confrontation hitting him all at once. Are you okay? Nora asked, approaching his desk while Lila explored the office. I don't know, Ethan admitted with rare honesty. Nora picked up the share certificates Lucas had left. He's giving you his part of the company to prevent a hostile takeover. Ethan explained, Vanguard is circling. Is that the only reason he came? Ethan considered the question. No. I think he genuinely wanted reconciliation. And you're not ready for that? It wasn't a question, but Ethan answered anyway. I don't know if I'll ever be ready. Nora sat on the edge of his desk, A casual intimacy that would have been unthinkable months ago. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened, Ethan. It's about not letting it control your future. He looked up at her, struck by the simple wisdom of her words. When did you get so philosophical? Around the time a billionaire CEO crashed into my life during a thunderstorm, she replied with a small smile. Ethan reached for her hand, linking their fingers together. I'm glad I did. Me too, she said softly. Now, about lunch. Over the next 2 weeks, Ethan found himself doing something entirely new, deliberately courting Nora, not for show, not for business, but because he genuinely wanted to. He sent flowers to her art therapy class. Not extravagant arrangements, but simple wildflowers similar to those she'd once pointed out during a walk in Central Park. He arranged a private showing of her artwork at a small gallery in Brooklyn, anonymously funding scholarships for underprivileged children, inspired by her paintings. He even learned to cook Lila's favorite pasta dish, though the kitchen looked like a war zone afterward. Small gestures. All of them. Yet they seemed to touch Nora more deeply than any grand display of wealth could have. You're different. Gregory Stone, the board chairman, commented after a meeting where Ethan had actually compromised on a point rather than steamrolling opposition. Hapir, it suits you. That evening, Ethan arrived home to find Nora curled up on the couch, reviewing documents from the children's hospital. Without thinking, he leaned down to kiss her. Hello, a casual intimacy that still sent warmth spreading through his chest. The art therapy program is gaining attention, she told him excitedly. 3 more hospitals have requested information about implementing similar programs. That's wonderful, Ethan said, sitting beside her. You should expand it. Nora looked up, surprised. That would require more funding, more staff. Consider it done. Whatever you need. She studied him thoughtfully. Ethan Marshall, venture philanthropist. I never would have predicted that 3 months ago. I never would have predicted any of this 3 months ago. Later that night, after Lila was asleep, they found themselves alone on the penthouse balcony. The city lights sparkled below them, a carpet of stars above. Ethan's arm around Nora's waist felt natural now, her head fitting perfectly against his shoulder. I never answered your question, he said softly, about what happens when the contract ends. Nora looked up at him. We still have months before that's an issue. No, Ethan said, turning to face her fully. I don't want to wait. I don't want there to be a contract between us anymore. Nora, I want you and Lila here because you choose to be, not because of any arrangement. Nora's eyes widened. Are you saying I'm falling in love with you? Ethan admitted, the words both terrifying and liberating. Not because it's convenient or good for business, but because you've shown me a life I never knew I wanted. As their kiss deepened, Ethan felt desire building, stronger than ever before. His hands slid down her back, caressing the curve of her waist as he whispered against her lips, Nora, I want you, not as part of any contract, just you. For a moment, she melted against him, her body responding with equal hunger. Then, to his surprise, she pulled back gently. Ethan, she whispered, her 4th rejection. Somehow even more powerful than the previous ones. Ask me again when you can say the words your heart is holding back. He frowned, confusion replacing desire. I just told you I'm falling in love with you. Falling, she repeated softly. Still safe, still controlled. Understanding dawned slowly. She wasn't rejecting him. She was asking for complete vulnerability, the final surrender of the walls he'd built around his heart. I'm trying, he whispered honestly. I know, she replied, kissing him softly, and that's why I can wait. Because what we're building deserves a foundation that's unshakable. As she slipped inside, leaving him alone with his thoughts, Ethan realized that for the first time in his life, he was pursuing something he couldn't acquire through money. Power, or strategic negotiation. He was pursuing love real, vulnerable, terrifying love, and the journey was changing him in ways no business deal ever could. Chapter 9, Loss and Revelation. The phone call came at 3:17 AWW. Shattering the peaceful quiet of the penthouse. Ethan reached for it groggily, instantly alert when he heard the panic in Nora's voice. Ethan, it's Lila. She can't breathe. He bolted from bed, rushing to the guest wing where Nora was cradling a gasping Lila. The child's lips had taken on the terrifying bluish tinge that signaled severe oxygen deprivation. Fear clutched at his heart, a sensation he'd never experienced in business. No matter how high the stakes, ambulance is on the way. Nora managed, tears streaming down her face. Her rescue inhaler isn't working. Ethan knelt beside them, forcing his voice to remain calm. "Lila, look at me. Focus on my voice." Slow, steady breaths. The little girl's terrified eyes locked onto his as she struggled for air. Ethan had never felt so helpless. Not even during the darkest days after his father's death or Sophie's betrayal. The paramedics arrived minutes later, working with practiced efficiency. Each intervention helped marginally, but Lila's condition remained critical. "We need to get her to the hospital now," the lead paramedic announced. In the emergency room, time warped strangely, stretching endlessly as they waited for updates, then compressing into terrifying moments of medical jargon and urgent decisions. The specialist called in for consultation finally approached them in the private waiting room. "Miss Vale, Mr. Marshall, Dr. Nguyen began, her expression grave. "Lila has suffered a severe complication of her asthma condition. We've stabilized her for now, but I'm concerned about the long-term prognosis." "What do you mean?" Nora asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's a specialized treatment available that could significantly improve her condition, possibly even provide a permanent solution, but it's only offered at the Muller Institute in Berlin." "How soon can she travel?" Ethan asked immediately. "With proper medical supervision, in about a week." "Dr. Nguyen replied. "But, Mr. Marshall, the treatment is experimental and extremely expensive. Insurance won't cover it." "Cost isn't an issue," Ethan said firmly. "Make the arrangements." After the doctor departed, Nora turned to Ethan, conflict evident in her tear-stained face. "Ethan, I can't let you do this. It must cost." "Don't," he interrupted gently. "Please don't finish that sentence. Not when it comes to Lila." In that sterile hospital waiting room, with Nora's tears soaking his shirt, Ethan Marshall finally admitted to himself what he'd been fighting for weeks. He loved them both. Not as assets or conveniences, but as the family he'd never allowed himself to want. 1 week later, Ethan stood in the private terminal at JFK Airport, watching as medical staff prepared the specially equipped jet for Lila's transfer to Berlin. The child sat in a wheelchair, still weak but stable, her ever-present stuffed rabbit clutched tightly in her arms. "Will you visit us?" she asked Ethan, her voice small beneath the pediatric oxygen mask. The question caught him off guard. "Of course I will," he promised automatically. Nora approached, carrying the last of their hastily packed bags. The past week had been a whirlwind of medical consultations and travel arrangements. She'd insisted on taking an indefinite leave from their arrangement, despite Ethan's protests that nothing needed to change. "The doctor says we're cleared for takeoff," she told him, her expression a mixture of gratitude and regret. "I don't know how to thank you for all this." "You don't need to," Ethan said simply. A slight awkwardness fell between them, the first since their relationship had evolved beyond its contractual beginnings. They both knew this departure marked a turning point, though neither seemed ready to define exactly what it meant. The treatment could take months, Nora reminded him. "We can't expect you to put your life on hold. What if I want to?" The words escaped before Ethan could consider their implications. Nora's eyes softened. "Ethan, you have a company to run. The merger can proceed without my constant presence." He countered. "That's what management teams are for." She studied him carefully. "This isn't just about Lila's treatment, is it?" Ethan hesitated, teetering on the edge of the emotional vulnerability she'd always encouraged in him. But before he could respond, the medical team signaled it was time to board. Nora nodded, then turned back to Ethan. "I guess this is goodbye for now." Ethan watched conflict play across her face. The same inner turmoil he felt. Words seemed inadequate for the complexity of emotions between them. Instead, he leaned forward, pressing his lips to hers in a kiss that carried everything he couldn't say aloud. When they separated, he whispered, "This isn't goodbye, it's just distance." 3 months passed. The Nakamura merger finalized with record-breaking stock valuations. Ethan threw himself into work with renewed intensity, as if the punishing 18-hour days could fill the void left by Nora and Lila's absence. "The quarterly projections are exceeding all targets," Gregory announced during the executive meeting. "The Nakamura partnership has positioned us perfectly against Vanguard's attempted hostile moves." Ethan nodded absently, his attention drawn to the tablet discreetly positioned beside his portfolio. The screen showed Lila's latest scan results from Berlin. Remarkable improvement after the experimental treatment. He'd arranged for all medical updates to be sent directly to him. Though his communications with Nora had become increasingly infrequent and formal, she'd insisted on maintaining distance, claiming he needed to focus on the merger without distractions. Each time he suggested visiting Berlin, she found a reason to postpone. The rejection stung more than he cared to admit. After the executives filed out, Hiroshi Nakamura himself remained behind, studying Ethan with thoughtful eyes. "You have achieved remarkable success with our partnership, Marshall-san," he observed. "Yet you seem troubled." Ethan straightened the already immaculate papers before him, just focused on the next phase. "Ah," Hiroshi nodded sagely, always looking forward. "Never enjoying the present momenta, common American business philosophy." "It served me well," Ethan replied defensively. "Has it?" Hiroshi asked mildly. "You have built an empire of glass and steel, accumulated wealth beyond measure. Yet happiness eludes you." Ethan looked up sharply. "I'm perfectly satisfied with my life." "Are you?" Hiroshi's gentle question carried no judgment. "Aiko and I were disappointed to hear Nora-san and little Lila had left for Berlin. We had hoped to include them in our family celebration next month. It was a medical necessity," Ethan explained stiffly. "Lila needed specialized treatment." Hiroshi studied him carefully. "And your presence was not necessary for this treatment." The question struck uncomfortably close to Ethan's private thoughts. "I have responsibilities here. The merger is complete," Hiroshi interrupted gently, "and remarkably successful. Thanks largely to the trust Nora-san helped build between our families." Ethan remained silent, uncertain how to respond to the unexpected direction of the conversation. "In Japan," Hiroshi continued, "we have a concept called ikigai, the reason for being. It lies at the intersection of what you love, what you are good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for." He smiled kindly. "You have mastered the last two B's, Marshall-san, but perhaps the first two deserve your attention now." After Hiroshi departed, Ethan stood at his office window, gazing out at the Manhattan skyline that had once represented everything he valued. Now the gleaming towers seemed empty, compared to the memory of Lila's laughter echoing through his penthouse, or Nora's paintings, bringing warmth to spaces he'd never realized were cold. His phone chimed with an alert. Another medical update from Berlin. Lila's latest test showed unprecedented improvement. The experimental treatment was working better than the specialists had hoped. Accompanying the clinical report was a personal note from Dr. Müller, the program director. "Remarkable progress largely attributable to exceptional emotional support from Guardian. Miss Vale's dedication has created optimal conditions for recovery." Ethan stared at the message, his chest tightening with an emotion he couldn't immediately identify. Pride. Certainly Nora's strength had always impressed him, but beneath that lay a more complicated feeling: regret. While Nora had been supporting Lila through grueling treatments, he'd retreated to the familiar comfort of business deals and boardrooms. He'd told himself he was giving them space, respecting Nora's wishes for distance, but the truth was simpler and more painful. He'd been afraid of the vulnerability that came with loving someone whose life hung in such a delicate balance. Afraid of being needed in ways stock portfolios and corporate acquisitions had never needed him. Afraid, most of all, of finally admitting what he'd known since that night on the balcony. That he loved Nora and Lila completely, without reservation or condition. In the grand ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria, hundreds gathered to celebrate the Marshall-Nakamura merger. Champagne flowed freely as financial analysts projected record-breaking profits for the coming year. Ethan moved through the crowd on autopilot, shaking hands and accepting congratulations with practiced charm. When he took the podium, the room fell silent in anticipation. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, following the prepared script. "Today marks the successful culmination of the largest tech merger in history. Marshall-Nakamura Technologies represents not just a business partnership, but a new paradigm in global innovation." The words felt empty as he spoke them. Ethan paused, looking out at the sea of expectant faces. In the front row, Aiko Nakamura watched him with knowing eyes, her husband beside her, nodding encouragement. "But success," he continued, deviating from his notes, "is meaningless without purpose. For years, I measured achievement in acquisitions and market share. I believed vulnerability was weakness and control was strength." A murmur of surprise rippled through the audience. This was not the calculating CEO they had come to expect. "I was wrong," Ethan said simply. "The most valuable lesson of this partnership came not from business strategy, but from understanding that true connection, whether between companies or people, requires genuine vulnerability, the willingness to risk being hurt, in order to create something meaningful." His gaze found Hiroshi, who nodded with quiet approval. "So, while I'm proud of what we've built professionally, I find myself reevaluating what truly constitutes success." Ethan straightened his shoulders, making a decision that would change everything. "And if you'll excuse me, I believe I have a plane to catch." Without further explanation, Ethan stepped away from the podium, leaving the stunned audience behind as he walked directly to the exit. For the first time in his career, Ethan Marshall was walking away from a business triumph to pursue something far more valuable and far more terrifying than any merger. He was pursuing love, whatever the cost. Chapter 10. Worth more than worlds. Berlin in autumn was a city of golden light and crisp air. Ethan stood outside the Mueller Institute, heart pounding as he stared up at the imposing medical facility. After walking out of his own merger celebration 3 days ago, he'd flown directly to Germany without notifying Nora. Now uncertainty gripped him as he wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. What if she didn't want him here? What if the distance of the past months had been her way of moving on? A familiar laugh caught his attention. Turning toward the Institute's garden, he saw Lila sitting on a bench. Her color remarkably improved as she fed birds with an elderly patient, the sight of her healthy, smiling, vibrant maid. His throat tightened with emotion. Ethan approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Excuse me, Miss Lila, is this seat taken?" The little girl looked up, her eyes widening in disbelief before she launched herself into his arms with a squeal of delight. "Ethan, you came. You really came." He caught her easily, surprised by how natural it felt to hold her close, how deeply he'd missed her exuberant affection. "I promised I would, didn't I? Auntie Nora said you were too busy with your big business deal." Lila informed him, pulling back to study his face. "But I told her you'd come anyway because you love us." The simple certainty in her voice humbled him. "You're very wise for someone who still believes in unicorns," he said, attempting to mask how deeply her words affected him. Lila grinned. "Unicorns might be real. The doctors fixed my lungs when everyone said they couldn't. Speaking of which, you look amazing," Ethan said, noticing how she breathed easily without any supplemental oxygen. "Doctor Müller says I'm his star patient," she declared proudly. "I can even run now. Want to see?" Before Ethan could respond, a familiar voice called from across the garden. "Lila, it's time for your." Nora stopped abruptly when she saw Ethan, her expression freezing in shock. She looked different, more confident somehow, her hair longer, her simple sundress, a stark contrast to the designer clothes she'd worn in New York Beautiful, in a way that made his carefully prepared speech dissolve into incoherence. "Ethan," she whispered, as if not quite believing her eyes. He stood, suddenly awkward despite rehearsing this moment for the entire flight. "Hello, Nora. What are you doing here?" The question held no anger, only genuine confusion. "I walked out of the merger celebration," he said simply, "left everyone staring. Gregory, the board, the press. I realized I was in the wrong place." Nora's eyes widened. "But the merger is fine," he assured her. "The contracts are signed. The business will thrive." He stepped closer, gathering his courage. "But I wasn't fine. Not without you. Not without Lila." Something in her expression softened, but she remained cautious. "Ethan, we talked about this. Your life is in New York, running your company." "No," he said firmly. "My life is wherever you and Lila are. The company is just buildings and contracts." It took me too long to understand the difference. Nora's expression remained guarded, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of hope. "What exactly are you saying?" Ethan took a deep breath. "I'm saying I was wrong about everything that matters. I spent my life building walls to protect myself from pain, measuring success in acquisitions rather than connections." He glanced at Lila, who watched them with unabashed interest. "And then you two crashed into my ordered world and showed me how empty it really was." "Ethan, please. Let me finish," he insisted gently. "I need to say this." He moved closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her eyes that had captivated him from the first night. "You asked me once to say the words my heart was holding back. I couldn't then. I can now." His voice lowered, intimate despite their public setting. "I love you, Nora." Not falling in love completely, terrifyingly in love. "And I love Lila, as if she were my own." Tears gathered in Nora's eyes, but she made no move toward him. "What about Marshall Tech, your life's work?" "I've stepped down as CEO," he revealed, the decision still fresh enough to send a tremor through him. "Lucas is taking over day-to-day operations with the board's oversight." "You reconciled with your brother?" Disbelief colored her voice. Ethan nodded, a weight visibly lifted from his shoulders. "Another lesson you taught me: some wounds are worth healing, even when it seems impossible." He reached for her hand, to relief washing through him when she didn't pull away. "I've established a new foundation focused on children's medical research and art therapy programs. If you'll have me, I'd like you to run it. Your vision, your passion, just with my resources behind you. And if I say no, Nora challenged, though her fingers tightened around his, then I'll follow you wherever you go. He said without hesitation, I've restructured my life to prioritize what truly matters. You and Lila, us together. He means it. Auntie Nora. Lila piped up, slipping her small hand into Ethan's free one. His eyes are doing that special thing they only do when he looks at us. A laugh escaped Nora despite her tears. What special thing is that? Little star. They get all soft and warm. Lila explained matter-of-factly, like melted ice cream. Ethan felt his cheeks warm at the child's perceptive description. Out of the mouths of babes, he murmured. Something shifted in Nora's expression, a final wall coming down. The last hesitation dissolving. You really left everything behind for us. Not everything. Ethan corrected softly. I brought everything that matters with me. He reached into his pocket, retrieving a small velvet box. Including this, if you'll accept it. Nora's breath caught as he opened the box to reveal not a diamond, but a simple pendant. A miniature origami crane crafted in silver. You left one on my pillow once, she whispered. After our first argument, Ethan nodded. In Japan, cranes symbolize hope and healing. I didn't have the words then to apologize properly. His voice grew husky with emotion. I have the words now. Nora, I love you. I want to build a life with you. And Lilano contracts. No. Arrangements. Just us. Figuring it out together. For one heart-stopping moment, Nora remained perfectly still. Then, with a soft cry that contained all the longing of their months apart, she threw her arms around his neck, her lips finding his in a kiss that held no hesitation. No boundaries, only the pure, unrestrained passion they'd both been holding back. Ethan pulled her closer, his arms encircling her waist as he poured every unspoken emotion into the kiss. The world around them faded, the garden, the hospital, everything beyond the perfect rightness of finally holding her, loving her without reservation. When they finally separated, breathless and flushed, Lila was watching them with delighted approval. Does this mean we're going to be a real family now? She asked hopefully. Nora looked up at Ethan, a question in her eyes despite the love shining through her tears. Yes, he answered, his gaze never leaving Nora's face. If that's what you both want, more than anything, Nora whispered, rising to her tiptoes to press another soft kiss to his lips. Then I have one more question, Ethan said, his voice wavering slightly as he reached into his pocket again. This time, he withdrew a small square box that made Nora's eyes widen. Dropping to one knee before her, he opened it to reveal a ring that somehow managed to be both elegant and understate exactly her taste. Nora Valley, he began, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. You walked into my life during a storm and showed me that true strength lies in vulnerability, not control. You challenged me, changed me, taught me what matters. Will you marry me? Not because of any contract or arrangement, but because I love you and want to spend the rest of my life proving worthy of your heart. Tears flowed freely down Nora's cheeks now. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Ethan Marshall, I will marry you. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Lila threw her arms around both of them, completing their embrace. Around them, hospital staff and patients who had witnessed the proposal broke into applause. But Ethan barely noticed. His entire world had narrowed to the two people in his arms, the family he'd never known he needed until a thunderstorm changed everything. Later that evening, in the privacy of Nora's apartment near the Institute, they surrendered completely to the passion they'd been denying for months. His hands traced every curve of her body with reverent desire as her fingers mapped the planes of his chest, lips met with hunger, no longer restrained, breath mingling as barriers dissolved completely between them. Each touch, each whispered endearment, healed the wounds of their separation, building toward a union that transcended physical pleasure to touch something deeper, to joining of two souls who had found in each other their perfect complement. As Ethan held Nora in his arms afterward, her head resting on his chest, he marveled at the journey that had brought them here, from a cold business arrangement to a love more powerful than either had imagined possible. What are you thinking? Nora murmured, tracing patterns on his skin. That some things truly can't be bought, he replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. They have to be earned through trust, respect, and love. And are they worth it? She asked, a smile in her voice. Ethan tilted her face up to his, losing himself in the warmth of her eyes. Worth more than worlds, he whispered before claiming her lips once more, sealing their future with a kiss that promised forever.